Marcus Thompson had always been the kind of soldier others overlooked. At 28, he stood barely 5'7" in his combat boots, with a quiet demeanor that made him blend into the background during briefings. His fellow Marines at Camp Pendleton often mistook his silence for weakness, his careful observation for hesitation. They called him Mouse behind his back, thinking he couldn't hear their whispered jokes about how he'd probably freeze up when real action came calling. The truth was far different. Marcus had grown up in the mountains of Montana, where his grandfather, a Korean War veteran, had taught him that the loudest voice in the room was rarely the strongest. His childhood was spent learning to track deer through dense forest, to move without disturbing a single branch, to wait for hours in complete stillness until the perfect moment presented itself. These skills seemed useless to his drill instructors, who valued aggression and volume over patience and precision. During training exercises, Marcus consistently scored in the top percentile for marksmanship and tactical awareness. But his quiet nature meant his achievements went largely unnoticed. While other recruits boasted about their scores, Marcus simply cleaned his rifle and prepared for the next challenge. His bunkmates would often find him reading military history books late into the night, studying the strategies of famous battles and the psychology of warfare. The military bureaucracy had assigned him the call sign Iron Wolf during his advanced training, a designation that seemed almost mocking given his reserved personality. The name came from a computer-generated list, and nobody bothered to change it because nobody paid much attention to Marcus anyway. His squad leader, Sergeant Rodriguez, saw potential in the young Marine but struggled to get others to take him seriously. Everything changed on a humid Tuesday morning when their unit received emergency deployment orders. Intelligence had located a high-value target in a remote compound in Afghanistan, and multiple teams were being assembled for what promised to be one of the most significant operations of the year. The target was Ahmad Hassan, a bomb maker responsible for dozens of attacks on coalition forces. His compound was nestled in a valley surrounded by steep cliffs, making conventional assault nearly impossible. As the briefing unfolded in the dimly lit operations tent, it became clear why this mission had stumped military planners for weeks. The compound sat at the bottom of a narrow valley with only one road leading in and out. Hassan had chosen his location well. Any approaching force would be exposed to crossfire from elevated positions for nearly 2 miles. Helicopter insertion was impossible due to the geography and the presence of surface-to-air missiles. The terrain was too rough for armored vehicles, and a direct assault would likely result in heavy casualties. Colonel Williams, a decorated officer with 3 tours under his belt, studied the satellite imagery with growing frustration. Previous attempts to reach the compound had failed spectacularly. A special forces team had tried a night approach 6 months earlier, only to be detected and forced to retreat after losing 2 men. Airstrikes were ruled out because Hassan kept civilian hostages, including children, in the compound. Marcus sat in the back of the briefing tent, listening intently as various officers proposed and discarded plan after plan. Some suggested a prolonged siege. Others recommended waiting for Hassan to leave the compound. Each option had fatal flaws. A siege would give Hassan time to escape through unknown tunnels, and intelligence suggested he rarely left his stronghold. As the discussion grew more heated and frustration mounted, Marcus found himself studying the topographical map from a different angle. His grandfather's voice echoed in his memory, sharing stories about how Native American warriors would find impossible paths through mountain ranges by thinking like the animals that lived there. Mountain goats didn't follow human logic. They found routes that seemed impossible but were actually the safest way through treacherous terrain. Marcus noticed something the others had missed. The western cliff face of the valley showed a series of natural ledges and crevices that weren't visible in the satellite photos but were clearly marked on the geological survey maps someone had overlooked in the intelligence packet. These formations suggested the presence of an ancient water channel, carved over centuries by seasonal runoff. If his reading of the terrain was correct, there might be a way to approach the compound from an angle nobody expected. His heart raced as he traced the potential route with his finger. It would require extraordinary climbing skills and nerves of steel, but it was theoretically possible for a small team to work their way along the cliff face under cover of darkness. They could position themselves directly above the compound, invisible to the guards who were watching the valley approaches. For 20 minutes, Marcus sat in silence, double and triple checking his assessment. The more he studied the maps, the more convinced he became that he had found a viable solution. But speaking up would mean drawing attention to himself, something he had spent his entire military career avoiding. The officers in the tent outranked him significantly, and questioning their strategic thinking could end his career. Sergeant Rodriguez noticed Marcus's intense focus on the maps and moved closer. He had learned to pay attention when his quiet Marine became completely absorbed in something. In training exercises, Marcus's careful analysis had saved their squad from several tactical mistakes, though he always shared his insights privately rather than speaking up in group settings. The colonel's voice cut through Marcus's thoughts as he announced that the mission would be postponed indefinitely while intelligence gathered more information. The assembled Marines began to disperse, but Marcus remained seated, still staring at the topographical map. His mind was racing through calculations of rope lengths, climbing equipment needs, and timing requirements. Sergeant Rodriguez approached as the tent emptied. He had seen that expression on Marcus's face before, usually right before the quiet Marine pointed out something everyone else had missed. Without saying a word, he sat down next to Marcus and waited. Years of experience had taught him that pushing Marcus to speak before he was ready was counterproductive. Marcus finally looked up, his eyes meeting his sergeant's gaze. The weight of what he was about to propose hit him fully. If he was wrong, he would be responsible for sending good Marines to their deaths. If he was right but failed to speak up, Hassan would continue making bombs that killed American soldiers. The choice was agonizing, but his grandfather's voice in his memory made it clear. Sometimes quiet strength had to become vocal courage. Taking a deep breath, Marcus pointed to the western cliff face on the map and began to explain what he had discovered. His voice was barely above a whisper, but every word was precise and carefully chosen. He outlined the geological formations, the seasonal water patterns that had carved the cliff face, and the tactical advantage such an approach would provide. Sergeant Rodriguez listened with growing amazement. The route Marcus described was incredibly dangerous, requiring expert-level climbing skills and perfect execution, but it was brilliant in its simplicity. Nobody would expect an attack from that direction because nobody believed it was possible. The compound's defenses were entirely focused on the valley floor and the obvious approach routes. As Marcus finished his explanation, Rodriguez realized he was looking at something extraordinary. This quiet Marine, whom others dismissed as unremarkable, had solved a tactical puzzle that had stumped senior officers and military planners. More importantly, he had done it by thinking differently, by approaching the problem from an angle that conventional military thinking had overlooked. The sergeant knew he had to get Marcus in front of Colonel Williams immediately. This wasn't just about one mission anymore. It was about recognizing a tactical mind that could change the way their unit approached impossible situations. He also knew that Marcus would never volunteer to present his plan to the colonel himself, which meant Rodriguez would have to make it happen. Within an hour, Marcus found himself standing in Colonel Williams's private quarters, maps spread across a field table, explaining his analysis to a room full of senior officers. His voice shook slightly at first, but as he detailed the route and tactical considerations, his confidence grew. The officers asked pointed questions, challenged his assumptions, and tested his knowledge of climbing techniques and night operations. Colonel Williams, a man known for his skeptical nature and reluctance to approve high-risk operations, found himself impressed despite his reservations. The plan was audacious and dangerous, but it addressed every weakness in their previous approaches. More importantly, the young Marine presenting it demonstrated a level of tactical thinking and terrain analysis that reminded the colonel of his best special operations officers. The room fell silent as Marcus finished his presentation. He stood at attention, waiting for the inevitable rejection or the polite dismissal that would send him back to his regular duties. Instead, Colonel Williams studied him with new interest, seeing past the quiet exterior to the sharp, analytical mind underneath. The colonel's next words would change everything. "Marine Thompson, you'll be leading the advance team on this operation. We're going to test your theory. And if you're right, you'll have saved a lot of lives and completed a mission everyone said was impossible." The next 72 hours transformed Marcus from an overlooked Marine into the center of intense military preparation. Colonel Williams assembled a specialized team of climbers and night operations experts, but made it clear that Marcus would be calling the tactical shots for the cliff approach. The weight of leadership sat heavily on his shoulders, especially when he realized that some of the Marines selected for his team were the same ones who had been calling him Mouse just days earlier. Staff Sergeant Johnson, a veteran with 2 Bronze Stars and a reputation for aggressive tactics, was openly skeptical about taking orders from someone he considered a desk jockey. During the first planning session, he challenged every aspect of Marcus's route, questioning whether someone with limited combat experience should be leading such a critical mission. His doubt was shared by others on the team. creating an atmosphere of tension that threatened to undermine the operation before it began. Marcus understood their concerns. He had never led a combat mission, and his quiet demeanor didn't inspire the kind of confidence these battle-tested Marines were accustomed to following. But he also knew that his analysis of the terrain was correct, and that conventional military thinking had failed to solve this problem precisely because it relied on traditional approaches. The breakthrough came during a nighttime training exercise in the California mountains. Marcus had insisted on practicing the cliff approach under conditions that mimicked what they would face in Afghanistan, including complete darkness, heavy equipment loads, and communication blackouts. Most of the team expected the exercise to expose the flaws in his plan and end the mission before it truly began. Instead, Marcus's performance during the training climb silenced his critics. Moving with the fluid grace of someone who had spent his childhood navigating mountain terrain, he demonstrated techniques that most of the team had never seen. He found handholds in seemingly smooth rock faces, identified stable routes that avoided loose stone, and moved with a silence that impressed even the most experienced night operations specialists. More importantly, his ability to read the terrain in real time proved invaluable when the team encountered unexpected obstacles during the training exercise. When a section of the planned route proved unstable, Marcus quickly identified an alternative path that actually provided better tactical positioning. His calm decision-making under pressure began to earn the respect of Marines who had initially doubted his capabilities. Sergeant Rodriguez watched the transformation with satisfaction. He had seen Marcus's potential during training exercises, but watching him step into a leadership role revealed depths of capability that even Rodriguez hadn't fully appreciated. The quiet Marine was proving that strength didn't always announce itself with volume and bravado. As the team prepared for deployment, Marcus spent hours studying updated intelligence reports and satellite imagery. Hassan's compound had been under constant surveillance, and the intelligence picture was becoming clearer. The bombmaker kept a strict schedule, moving between different buildings within the compound at predictable times. This routine would be crucial for timing the assault to maximize effectiveness while minimizing civilian casualties. The compound itself was a fortress built into the valley floor, with thick stone walls and strategically placed guard towers. Hassan had learned from previous attacks on similar facilities, incorporating design features that made conventional assault extremely difficult. The main building where he worked on his explosive devices was positioned at the center of the compound, surrounded by sleeping quarters for guards and family members. Intelligence reports indicated that Hassan never slept in the same location twice in a row, moving between 3 different buildings within the compound based on a pattern that had taken analysts months to decipher. The unpredictability was intentional, making it nearly impossible for airstrikes or snipers to target him with certainty. Marcus studied these reports with the same intensity he had brought to analyzing the terrain. The tactical challenge wasn't just reaching the compound, it was neutralizing Hassan while avoiding civilian casualties and accounting for the unpredictable movements of guards and family members throughout the facility. His solution was characteristically unconventional. Rather than planning a direct assault on the main building, Marcus proposed a psychological warfare approach that would use Hassan's own paranoia against him. By creating the appearance of attacks from multiple directions simultaneously, they could force Hassan to retreat to his most secure location, making him predictable for the first time in months. The plan required perfect coordination and split-second timing. The main team would position themselves on the cliff face above the compound, while diversionary forces created the illusion of attacks from the valley approaches. Hassan's natural response would be to retreat to his underground bunker, the most secure location in the compound, but also the one place where he would be completely trapped. Colonel Williams reviewed the plan with a mixture of admiration and concern. The psychological elements were sophisticated, requiring a deep understanding of Hassan's personality and behavioral patterns. The timing had to be precise, with multiple moving parts coordinating across difficult terrain in complete darkness. It was the kind of complex operation that typically required months of planning and specialized units with years of experience working together. Yet Marcus had developed and refined the entire strategy in less than a week, incorporating input from intelligence analysts, psychological warfare specialists, and combat veterans into a cohesive plan that addressed every major challenge. His ability to synthesize complex information from multiple sources into actionable tactics impressed everyone involved in the planning process. The night before deployment, Marcus found himself alone with the tactical maps one final time. The weight of responsibility was overwhelming. 12 Marines would be following his lead into an operation that could easily result in casualties if his analysis proved incorrect. The families of these Marines were counting on him to bring their loved ones home safely. His grandfather's voice echoed in his memory again, sharing a story about a hunting expedition where a wrong decision had cost the life of a pack horse. The lesson wasn't about the mistake itself, but about the responsibility that came with making decisions that affected others. Leadership, his grandfather had said, wasn't about being right all the time. It was about accepting the weight of consequences and making the best decisions possible with available information. Marcus felt ready. His analysis was thorough, his preparation was complete, and his team had trained extensively for every contingency they could anticipate. More importantly, he had found his voice as a leader, learning to balance his natural caution with the decisiveness required in combat situations. The deployment itself was routine until they reached the forward operating base in Afghanistan. The reality of the environment hit Marcus immediately. The heat was oppressive even at night, and the terrain was more challenging than the California training sites. The rocks were different, with a tendency to crumble unexpectedly, and the altitude affected breathing and endurance in ways that would impact the cliff climb. Local intelligence updates painted a concerning picture. Hassan had increased security around the compound in recent weeks, possibly indicating awareness that coalition forces were planning an operation. Additional guards had been posted, and new defensive positions had been constructed along the valley approaches. The increased security made conventional assault even more impossible but didn't affect Marcus's cliff approach. The team had 3 days to acclimate to local conditions and finalize their preparations. Marcus used this time to study the actual terrain they would be navigating, comparing his maps and satellite imagery to the reality of the landscape. Small discrepancies that seemed minor on paper proved significant when translated to actual climbing routes. On the second night, Marcus led a reconnaissance mission to examine the cliff face up close. Moving alone under cover of complete darkness, he confirmed that his route analysis was correct but identified several sections that would require different techniques than he had originally planned. The ancient water channel was exactly where geological surveys indicated, but centuries of erosion had created some unstable areas that would need to be avoided. Returning to the forward operating base, Marcus briefed his team on the necessary adjustments to their approach. His confidence in the mission remained strong, but the reality of the environment had reinforced the inherent dangers they would be facing. One mistake during the cliff climb would likely result in death, and the margin for error was smaller than anyone preferred. Staff Sergeant Johnson, who had become one of Marcus's strongest supporters during training, pulled him aside after the briefing. The veteran Marine had seen enough combat to recognize the signs of pre-mission stress, and he wanted to make sure Marcus understood that the team was fully committed to following his lead. Their conversation revealed something that surprised both men. Johnson had initially doubted Marcus not because of his tactical thinking, which he had always recognized as superior, but because he worried that Marcus's quiet nature would make it difficult for him to make the hard decisions that combat situations required. The reconnaissance mission had demonstrated that Marcus could be decisive when necessary, completing the psychological transformation from analyst to leader. The final night before the mission, Marcus couldn't sleep. He reviewed every aspect of the plan repeatedly, visualizing potential problems and solutions. His mind raced through equipment checklists, communication protocols, and contingency plans. The responsibility for 12 lives weighed heavily, but underneath the anxiety was a growing sense of confidence that he had prepared as thoroughly as possible. At 0300 hours, Colonel Williams personally briefed the team one final time. Intelligence had confirmed that Hassan was in the compound and following his usual routine. Weather conditions were optimal, with no moon and minimal wind that would affect climbing conditions. All diversionary forces were in position and air support was standing by for emergency extraction if the mission encountered unexpected complications. As the team prepared to move out, Marcus felt the transformation complete itself. The quiet Marine who had spent his career avoiding attention was about to lead one of the most challenging missions his unit had ever attempted. His grandfather would have been proud to see the mountain skills he had taught being used to save American lives and stop a terrorist who had caused so much destruction. The truck ride to the insertion point was silent, each Marine lost in his own thoughts and final preparations. Marcus stared out at the dark landscape, knowing that in a few hours everything would change. Success would validate his unconventional approach to tactical thinking. Failure would cost lives and confirm the doubts of everyone who had ever called him Mouse. But as they approached the insertion point and began final equipment checks, Marcus realized he was no longer the same person who had sat quietly in the back of briefing rooms. The challenges of the past week had revealed capabilities he didn't know he possessed and confidence he had never felt before. Win or lose, he would never again be underestimated by anyone, including himself. The insertion went flawlessly. Under complete darkness, Marcus led his team to the base of the western cliff face, moving with the silence his grandfather had taught him in the Montana wilderness. Each Marine carried specialized climbing equipment and communications gear, their weapons configured for close-quarters combat. The diversionary teams were positioned at strategic points around the valley, ready to create the illusion of multiple simultaneous attacks. Marcus secured his climbing harness and began the ascent, feeling for handholds that were invisible in the darkness. Every movement was deliberate and tested before committing his weight. Behind him, 11 Marines followed his route exactly, trusting his ability to navigate terrain that would have challenged experienced mountaineers even in daylight. The ancient water channel proved to be everything Marcus had hoped for and more. Carved by centuries of seasonal runoff, it provided a natural pathway up the cliff face, with enough handholds and ledges to support their ascent. The route was steep and demanding, but it was climbable by Marines with proper training and equipment. 2 hours into the climb, they reached the critical halfway point, where the route became most exposed to detection from the compound below. Marcus paused to check his watch and coordinate with the diversionary teams through hand signals relayed down the climbing line. The timing had to be perfect. Too early and Hassan might not respond predictably. Too late and the climbing team would be caught exposed on the cliff face during daylight. At exactly 0445 hours, the diversionary attacks began. Coordinated explosions and small arms fire erupted from 3 different positions around the valley, creating the impression of a major assault converging on the compound from multiple directions. Marcus watched through night vision as guards rushed to defensive positions, their attention completely focused on the valley floor threats. Hassan's response was exactly what psychological profiles had predicted. Within minutes of the first explosions, thermal imaging detected movement toward the central bunker as the bomb maker retreated to his most secure location. The diversionary forces maintained their assault pattern, keeping guards occupied while Marcus's team completed their ascent undetected. The final approach to the compound required crossing 30 meters of open ground from the cliff edge to the outer walls. Marcus had identified this as the most dangerous phase of the operation, where his team would be most vulnerable to detection. The diversionary attacks provided perfect cover, with guards focused entirely on threats they could see and understand. Marcus led the crossing in pairs, using hand signals to coordinate movement. His grandfather's lessons about moving through forest without disturbing wildlife translated perfectly to military stealth techniques. Each Marine crossed the open space like a shadow, reaching the compound walls without triggering any alarms or drawing attention from guards. The compound's interior layout matched intelligence reports exactly. Hassan's bunker was located beneath the central building, access to a concealed entrance that intelligence had identified weeks earlier. The diversionary attacks were reaching their planned crescendo, creating maximum chaos and confusion throughout the compound. Marcus positioned his team around the bunker entrance while using thermal imaging to track Hassan's location. The bomb maker was exactly where psychological profiles predicted he would be, hiding in the deepest part of his underground facility with 2 bodyguards. The bunker's design, intended to protect Hassan from airstrikes and conventional assault, had become a trap that eliminated his escape options. The assault on the bunker required split-second coordination. Marcus's team breached the entrance simultaneously from multiple angles, using flashbang grenades and night vision equipment to maintain tactical advantage in the underground environment. The bodyguards were neutralized within seconds, trained reflexes no match for Marines who had rehearsed this exact scenario dozens of times. Hassan himself offered no resistance, surrendering immediately when confronted by armed Marines in his supposedly impregnable bunker. The bomb maker who had terrorized coalition forces for months was captured alive, along with detailed plans for future attacks and intelligence about his network of contacts throughout the region. The extraction proved as flawless as the insertion. While diversionary forces maintained their coordinated withdrawal, Marcus led his team back across the compound and down the cliff face with their high-value prisoner. Hassan, secured in climbing gear and supervised by 2 Marines, made the descent without incident, his capture remaining undetected by guards still focused on valley floor threats. By sunrise, the team had reached the extraction point, where helicopters waited to transport them back to the forward operating base. The entire operation had taken less than 6 hours from insertion to extraction, with no casualties among coalition forces and minimal collateral damage to the compound. Hassan was in custody, along with intelligence materials that would prevent dozens of planned attacks. Colonel Williams personally debriefed the team upon their return. His assessment was unequivocal. Marcus had planned and executed one of the most successful high-risk operations in recent memory, solving a tactical problem that had stumped conventional military thinking for months. The psychological warfare elements combined with the unconventional approach route had achieved complete tactical surprise against a target that intelligence considered nearly impregnable. The success of the mission sent ripples throughout the command structure. Marcus's innovative approach challenged traditional assumptions about terrain analysis and tactical planning, demonstrating that conventional military wisdom didn't always provide the best solutions to complex problems. His ability to synthesize information from multiple sources into creative tactical solutions marked him as a rising star in special operations planning. More importantly for Marcus personally, the mission marked his complete transformation from overlooked analyst to respected leader. Staff Sergeant Johnson, who had initially questioned Marcus's combat readiness, became one of his strongest advocates, praising his calm decision-making under pressure and his ability to adapt to changing conditions during the operation. The success also validated Marcus's grandfather's lessons about thinking differently and finding strength in quiet observation. The skills learned during childhood hunting expeditions in Montana mountains had proved more valuable in combat than traditional military training, demonstrating that diverse backgrounds and unconventional thinking could provide crucial advantages in complex situations. 3 days after the successful mission, Marcus found himself in Colonel Williams's office again. But this time the circumstances were dramatically different. Instead of presenting untested theories to skeptical officers, he was receiving commendation for exceptional performance and discussing his future role in the unit's special operations capabilities. The colonel offered Marcus immediate promotion and assignment to advanced tactical planning positions that would allow him to apply his innovative thinking to other challenging missions. The quiet Marine, who had spent his career avoiding attention, was suddenly being courted by elite units throughout the military, all eager to benefit from his unique approach to tactical analysis. But the most significant change wasn't in how others viewed Marcus. It was in how he viewed himself. The mission had revealed capabilities he hadn't known he possessed and confidence he had never experienced. He no longer questioned his ability to make crucial decisions or lead others in dangerous situations. The transformation from mouse to iron wolf was complete. During the weeks following the operation, Marcus received official recognition for his tactical innovation and leadership under pressure. The mission became a case study in military academies, demonstrating how unconventional thinking and diverse skill sets could solve problems that traditional approaches couldn't address. His techniques were incorporated into advanced training programs, influencing how future Marines would approach similar challenges. The captured bomb maker provided intelligence that prevented multiple planned attacks and led to the disruption of an entire terrorist network. Hassan's detailed plans revealed the scope of threats coalition forces had been facing, making Marcus's successful mission even more significant in terms of lives saved and future attacks prevented. Perhaps more importantly, the operation changed how Marcus's unit approached tactical planning. His success encouraged other Marines to speak up when they identified unconventional solutions to military challenges, creating a culture that valued innovative thinking alongside traditional military virtues. Marcus himself evolved into a mentor for other quiet Marines who possessed analytical skills but lacked confidence to share their insights. He learned to recognize the signs of untapped potential and create opportunities for others to demonstrate capabilities that might otherwise remain hidden. 6 months after the mission, Marcus received orders to attend advanced training at the military's most prestigious Special Operations School. His instructors there were surprised to discover that many of the innovative techniques he demonstrated had been learned not in military training, but during childhood expeditions with his grandfather in Montana wilderness. The call sign, Iron Wolf, took on new meaning within his unit. No longer a randomly assigned designation, it represented the perfect combination of patient observation and decisive action that had made the mission successful. Other Marines began to understand that the quietest member of their team might also be the most dangerous, and that underestimating someone based on their demeanor was a mistake they couldn't afford to make. Years later, when Marcus had achieved senior leadership positions and was training new generations of Marines, he would often tell them about the importance of diverse perspectives and unconventional thinking. His grandfather's lessons about patience, observation, and finding unexpected paths through difficult terrain had proved more valuable in military service than anyone could have predicted. The mission that started with everyone underestimating the quiet Marine ended with "Iron Wolf, stand by," becoming a phrase that commanded immediate attention and respect throughout the command structure. Marcus had proved that strength didn't always announce itself loudly, that innovation often came from unexpected sources, and that the most effective leaders were sometimes those who had learned to think differently. His transformation from overlooked analyst to respected tactical innovator became legendary within special operations communities, inspiring other Marines to look beyond conventional approaches and trust their unique perspectives when facing impossible challenges. The mountain boy from Montana had found his place in the military not by conforming to traditional expectations, but by applying the lessons his grandfather had taught him about finding strength in silence and wisdom in patient observation. The compound in that Afghan valley had been considered impregnable by conventional military analysis, but it fell to a quiet Marine who understood that sometimes the most difficult problems required the most unconventional solutions. Marcus Thompson had earned his place among the elite, not by being the loudest or most aggressive, but by being the most thoughtful and innovative when it mattered most.